Before we start today's video, I'd like to take a moment to give a big thank you to the family of Kirk Evans, who came forward to provide me with details and who asked me to cover this case. Now, this is a case that still remains unsolved, so here we are today, making sure that we revisit the case so that it gets the proper attention. But it goes without saying that the details in the story can be a bit much for some, so before jumping in, viewer discretion is advised.
Well, Bill, approved about 4 years ago by the state, it's called familial DNA, and this is the first time this technology has been used to solve a cold case in New York City.
It has been 22 years since her life was cruelly taken, but detectives never gave up on finding justice for her and her family.
Cold case teams often use new technology to re-examine old evidence. Cops say data recovered from the phone helped dispute Vagia's alibi, which she shared with CBS 2's Lou Young in 2017.
You're about to get an exclusive look at the biggest state-of-the-art DNA crime lab in North America. And it's right here in the city at the office of the Chief Medical Examiner.
Over the years, New York City and the rest of the country have seen a huge increase in solved crimes from a different decade that have long been forgotten. It takes persistence, valid information to pursue, and most of all, people who care enough to seek the truth and get to the bottom of what really happened. From cases like Minnerly Soriano to the Golden State Killer, these new methods in DNA testing have made it possible to give families closure, no matter how many years have passed. A lot of cases have hit a wall with no new information to go after. Other cases have evidence that needs to be reinvestigated, and we're here to talk about one of those cases today. A case that's been cold for nearly 20 years, with no signs of new developments and no signs of justice or closure for those involved.
Now, when asked if this new technology would be a game changer for prosecutors, the DA said, "We'll just have to see."
On today's episode of Evil Intentions, this is A Brother's Love, the story of Kirk Evans. Kirk Randy Evans was born on January 13th, 1984, and was from the Bronx, New York. Kirk was described by loved ones as a kind-hearted and driven man. He was smart, funny, fashionable, and was always keeping up with the latest trends. He loved music and could talk about hip-hop for hours on end with anybody. His personality drew others to him, and everyone loved being around him. Kirk, like a lot of 19-year-olds, loved women and loved being in their company. He was charming and had no trouble when it came to getting to know people. But most of all, what Kirk loved was his family. He had goals to make things happen for himself, and he was on that path. Since young, Kirk didn't live with the rest of his siblings and spent most of his time raised by their grandmother. But this didn't stop the family from having a very close relationship. Kirk was loved by all those around him and had a tight-knit relationship with his siblings and the rest of his family. The people closest to Kirk couldn't even recall him ever having any enemies. By June of 2003, Kirk was already on his way to graduating high school and was on his way to culinary school since he loved to cook. He would also pick up a part-time job at McDonald's so that he could save money. The entire process and transition was a bit stressful for Kirk, as it is for many, but still, he didn't let this slow him down. He knew exactly what he wanted to do. Kirk, by all accounts, was always seen as a mild-mannered teen who didn't have any issues with anyone. In fact, some felt that Kirk might have been very trusting, maybe too trusting. He saw the good in people before ever seeing anything else. The only thing that even comes close to an issue for Kirk was when he got into a fight with one of his two best friends. The fight was believed to be over a woman. It was after this fight that Kirk's grandmother would send him to live with his aunt, who also resided in the Bronx, just until things cooled down. They felt it would be good for him. And so, Kirk went on to make his future plans, and although he was a little stressed about the end of the school year, he was looking forward to everything he had planned. But on Wednesday, August 20th of 2003, Kirk's family would return to their home in the Bronx to make a shocking discovery, one that would forever scar them and leave them with more than 2 decades worth of questions. Earlier that day, it was reported that Kirk had visited a nearby Chinese restaurant in the neighborhood. He then returned home. Whatever happened between then and midnight remains a mystery till this day, because at around 12:30 a.m., Kirk's aunt and uncle would be returning from a vacation in Miami when they'd come to find their home ransacked, turned upside down. Kirk's aunt had assumed that Kirk had a party because everything was such a mess. She would scream, "Kirk, you better have a good reason for this," but she got no response. After unloading their suitcases, they'd walk up to the second-floor bedroom, and there they'd find Kirk's cold dead body hidden under a sheet. Authorities were called to the scene right away. Kirk was found to have been stabbed a total of 19 times throughout his body. Defense wounds show that Kirk fought for his life, with stab wounds sustained to his hands and arms. A stab wound to Kirk's forehead was believed to have been the fatal wound that ended his life. Neighbors next door could clearly hear the moment that the terrible discovery was made. The sheer brutality of the attack indicates that this could have been very personal. The crime scene showed zero evidence of a break-in, letting detectives know that Kirk likely knew his killer. Now keep in mind that surveillance video in this area existed, but not at the level that it does these days, so much harder to determine who entered and exited that home. DNA was also found under Kirk's fingernails, but at the time, when tested, it brought nothing up for authorities. For whatever reason, none of Kirk's friends were ever questioned. Until this day, nobody has come forward with any information. To make matters worse, sometime after all this happened, some of Kirk's family would bump into a few of his friends at a local clothing store, but the interaction seemed very much off. It seemed as if they were hesitant to interact with the family, and one of Kirk's other best friends also gave the family some weird vibes from the very beginning. Testing the DNA found on Kirk back then can have an entirely different outcome if tested today. If you're seeing this video, please do your best to share this so that word gets around, and so that this case is looked into again, because this family, like many others, deserves closure. Kirk's killer is still out there, and who knows, they might be much closer than authorities think. Did you know Kirk Evans? Anyone with information regarding Kirk's death is urged to call the New York City Tips Hotline. Rest in peace, Kirk Evans. You aren't forgotten.